this. I've already pushed that out to parents and to teachers. Some of you may have gotten that if you're on my emails. I shared just some highlights, but I really do look at that as just a baseline. I feel like I'll have more valuable insight from the benchmark once we take the second one in December, but that's just my take on it. However, what I wanted to share with y'all tonight is things that I'm doing, that the teachers are doing, that we're doing as a team to try to chase down the points that we feel like we might have left on the table before that stood between us being or moving from a B to an A. We were, in my opinion, a fairly low B. We have about, I think it was like 120, I can't remember, it was a little over 100 points that we need to make up according to the accountability model that was last year. Now that has changed, so a lot of our approach has changed, and a lot of it is going to be interesting to see how it all plays out, but I wanted to highlight some things that we're doing differently at Vardaman to try to chase down some of those points. 550 of the points, if you're talking about this from 3rd grade through 8th grade, 550 of those points on that 1,000-point scale come from proficiency and growth. So that's every student that scores a 4 or a 5 out of the 5 levels on the state test for proficiency, or a student who moves from one performance level to the next. So even if you can't get them to that 4, if you could get them from a 1 to a 2, you're still going to get that growth and proficiency point along those scales. So that's a huge chunk of our points. And a lot of that is exactly what Ms. King and what Ms. Nix talked about. It's that tier 1 instruction, and we're driving that. We bought Exact Path for the teachers to use this year, and that is, it's through the company Edmentum. The kids are on it. They can earn trophies, and it helps us track those kids, especially those that we need to have targeted time on there who might be at risk. But those points are taken care of themselves by us doing our job to facilitate that tier 1 instruction, removing barriers. When we sat down with the teachers and talked about benchmark 1, I was talking less about scores and more about those individual kids that were on that paper. So if I saw something that was alarming or something that, in our conversations is what's going on with this kid? Are they coming to school? What can we do to help? What is challenging to reach this group? Those kind of things, and us standing in the gap and filling in how we can in those situations. But those grade level meetings were especially targeted this time on that bottom 25%. The accountability model puts heavy weight on the bottom 25% because those kids count for you in multiple categories. So some of our bottom 25% are in the level 3. So they technically passed the state test, but they're still in the bottom 25%. So they stand a chance to earn points for us by if we can move them one level to 4. Not only are we going to get a point for growth for all, a point growth for the bottom 25%, a point growth for proficiency. You're talking about some of these kids that are worth 3 to 5 points. And all it takes is a little bit of strategy most of the time. Because what a lot of teachers and parents and even some, I have to remind myself sometimes, the bottom 25% doesn't just mean, well, I'm going to run my grade book and see who's not doing so well right now. But that's not, according to the state, the bottom 25% is based on that state test from last year. And when they take that state test again, those are the kids that they're going to be measuring to determine whether or not we get the point. So yes, we always want to try to help the ones who are struggling, and we've got built-in supports for that. But some of those kids can easily fall through the cracks. If they're a student that doesn't receive any special services, they're not EL, they don't get EL support, they're just that middle-of-the-road kid that will fall through the cracks unless you know just for some reason or another they were in the bottom 25% from last year. So making sure that we're not leaving those points on the table and identifying those kids by name. Because I've always said, and I've said when I took this job, kids are more than a number to me. But as long as the state is assigning a number to those kids, we want it to be as high as we can possibly get it to be. So that's where we stood on that. So we had those grade level meetings from that benchmark, and we've already had some parent conferences from those. Identifying kids who, well, they're here, but they're not doing anything in class, and things like that I might can help facilitate conversations about to help move the needle with those kids. Because we have the elementary and the high school, the growth and proficiency is a lot to look at when you're looking at those benchmark scores. But a lot of what's changed is what Ms. King talked about earlier too, are points that we can chase down at the secondary level with those high school students. The graduation rate is 200 points of the 1,000 point scale. And I'm not sure if you know how that works, but how it is, every year the group of 9th graders comes into the high school, whether it be Vardaman High School, Calhoun City High School, Bruce High School, wherever. That group of ninth graders is cohorted, as the state calls it, in the emphasis system. So this is saying they've started ninth grade. That means in 4 years they ought to be exiting stage where they need to be out. They should be out of here if all the stars align and everything goes like it should. They meet all the requirements. So that cohort travels up through the system, and then at the end of this year, they'll look at that cohort of that group from when they entered ninth grade to where they are after graduation, and then they will calculate our percentage based on that. I looked at our cohort that we're working with this year. Some of those kids I've never even seen. They don't even go to school at Vardaman anymore. They don't go to school in county anymore. And it'll say, and there's ways that accountability is shared, but being able to go through and meticulously look at each individual student to see, this kid is supposed to leave school this year. Are we doing everything we can to make sure that they're meeting the requirements to do so? We've got a lot of support from Ms. Jackson and Ms. Hall and Mr. Mays and them over there who help with credit recovery and things like that. But increasing the way we audit those reports with the new emphasis 2.0, it does make it a lot easier. So we're working on that right now, and we're starting that early. So when the kids are in 10th grade, we're already looking at them. All right, what's their cohort here? Where are we at? What state test have we passed? What classes are we taking? What kind of ruling do we have if we are receiving special education services? Are we on the most appropriate diploma track? Those kinds of things. And it really is a one-on-one thing when you nail down into it to talk to these kids. And it does take a lot of intentionality, so we're working on that. Because we have been leaving some points, I think, on the table from graduation rate. Vardaman's was 87.2 is what our accountability this year, our D was based on that. It's also a lagging indicator, so last year's graduation rate is what we will be based on this year for our accountability rate. Right now, if all the stars align and everything goes great and we keep on track with what we're doing, we're looking at about a 92% graduation rate for the current group of seniors, but we won't get that on our accountability model until next school year. So it's kind of weird how some of all that comes together. Something that we didn't do as hot on, I feel like we went down on, and there's a lot of room for growth in this, was our acceleration component. I did away with study halls completely when I came in, and I wanted them to be replaced with something more intentional. We've now got 2 sections of ACT prep. We were able to send, because the people in Oxford, I called in some favors, and we now have a teacher for each subsection of the ACT that is AIM certified for each of those sections, so we can offer some real and true boot camps. AIMS is the ACT Instructional Mastery certification that ACT gives. It's a big deal to get it, and so they've been doing that. And I'll tell you, when you're talking about incentivizing scores for kids, an elementary student's going to get real excited to go watch a movie or go play in the park for a little bit, but a high school kid don't care nothing about it. They don't want to. But what they will fight for is something to wear at graduation. And I've learned that in my experience with working with high school. So we have completely revamped our regalia, and I'm not going to walk through it, but you can look through it and see all the different cords that they can get for each subsection of the ACT. We're giving a district ACT this week. We've got 70 kids signed up to take it. And I'm used to larger numbers of students, but they said that is a lot of kids to take the ACT one time. None of them have come to back out, and I'm telling you why. Is because of this right here. Because they have, for each subsection is a different core for the ACT. So even if they can just get it in one section, they're going to have a chance to get recognized. And they see it as a personal challenge, but not just the ACT, also the ACT work keys, the different chords for the different levels of that, and for the ASVAB. We're giving them a camouflage chord for the ASVAB if they can get a 36 or higher. And you would be surprised what some of those kids will do for a camouflage chord. I ordered samples of all these, and we've been going around. We've been talking to the kids about the test and the importance of it, and what it can mean for them by way of scholarship or getting into trade programs and making themselves competitive. And when they saw that camouflage chord, it was like, they said they wanted me to skip the rest of it and go straight. And I had a few of them, and I was, of course not saying names, but there was one I knew for a fact. I had looked at the ASVAB scores from last year. He's a senior, and he had a 1 out of 100. And so he was like, I want that camouflage chord. And I was like, well, in a private conversation with him, I said, you had a 1 on the ASVAB last year, I think you have to spell your name wrong and not answer any questions. And he said, well, I didn't want the military calling me and asking me to come to work. I said, well, I tell telemarketers no every day. But they will do it for a court, as crazy as that sounds. And so now that this accountability model is taking into account their ASVAB score and their work key score, at the end of every year, the counselors and the administrators work together and we submit what's called a senior snapshot to the state. That senior snapshot is going to have every senior's name with every score they've got, every sub-score of the ACT, every state test they've taken, the work keys, the ASVAB, you name it, it's all on there on one line. And now they're assigning points to us based on that. So I'm trying to incentivize every point counts on all of these tests and the subsections of those tests, not only for the kids to meet graduation requirements or scholarship requirements, but for us to chase down some of those acceleration points. Talking about dual credit is the same way where you can get acceleration points from that. When I came in, I was shown an agreement that y'all have been working on for the students to agree to take those classes seriously when the district is paying the bill for them to take those dual credit classes. You may not know that a lot of those dual credit classes are online. They're completely, the students have to be self-sufficient and do the work on their own, and there's not a teacher standing over their shoulder. When they didn't sit well with me and I did away with study also, I created an online course section in our master schedule where some of those kids who need that extra support, but they're capable of doing a dual credit class, can go into that class and work on that, have dedicated time in their schedule working on that with a certified teacher helping them and monitoring and making sure they're getting done. They're not grading the work, but they're making sure that it gets submitted, which honestly is harder than it seems a lot of the times. We're also adding 2 new AP classes for the spring, AP US History and AP Biology. So for every student that participates in one of those classes and scores a 3 or higher on that AP exam, that will give us additional points for acceleration too. And there have been, or at least it's been a while, I believe, Dr. Booth, since they have last offered an AP class at Martin. And then working with CTE, making sure that they can pass those industry certifications and things like that will help us make sure that we get those acceleration points. So again, with college and career readiness, it's a lot of the same based on those ACT and ASVAB and work key scores incentivized. The diploma endorsement she was talking about, if the kids will be willing to take an extra class or 2 or whatever it is that's standing between them and that next endorsement, they'll be able to wear that gold, some people call it a hood, some people call it a bib. It's the gold thing on the hand out here. I don't know what it's called. Stole, it's a stole, but those are stoles too. So. But they will actually have their endorsements embroidered on there. We're going to do that for them. You can get more than one endorsement option, so anything to incentivize those extra points that we can get, we wanted to do. But ultimately, I'm excited about what the benchmark scores are telling us. I think we can get there. I hope it can be done in 1 year. There are some lagging indicators like those bank scores or graduation rate that comes into account and that we're all dealing with at Bruce and at Calhoun City and at Martin. But it's not because the teachers aren't capable, it's not because the kids aren't capable. They're all doing a great job. I think it's just really intentionality and us trying to make sure that we're chasing down those points in every corner that